to give you a little bit of sort of maybe food for thought, these are the things that I've done. I'm not sort of here to outline my CV, but maybe it will give you an idea of some of the things that I might be able to help with, because I know a lot of you educators in classroom settings and general teachers and band teachers, and these are where my strengths lie. So the last 10 years, I've been doing things with blogs, online blogs, podcasts, live streams, digital and print productions, running in-person physical festivals, courses, membership sites, one-to-one teaching and one-to-group teaching, and also challenges that go over spans of weeks and months with people in this kind of format using Zoom and Skype and whatnot. Facebook groups, using mailing lists, marketing and advertising, team management, Zoom, Skype, and Google Hangouts as software for interfacing with people, video production and editing, audio production, graphic design, and sort of outsourcing work. So this is what I do full time. And I know a lot of people have been thrust into this world, some unwillingly. So I just hope that maybe this can offer a chance to ask questions, and I hope that I can help give some advice. And I'm sure some of you as well will have some advice to share with the rest of us. So I'd like to open it up. If anyone does have any questions to get us started, it'd be very welcome. You can just unmute yourself and we can get the ball rolling. Or if anyone, you can sort of, because I know maybe people are afraid of unmuting. If you want to put your hand up, if you have a particular topic, anything you've been struggling with. Yeah, okay, I see two hands. All right, I'm going to start with Jean.
Yes, thank you, Simon. This is a great thing. I'm one of those who's on
your audio, Jean.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
So maybe, Jean, I'm going to go to...
go to the next one.
Jean, I'm going to give you a second, come back to you. Maybe have a play around with the audio. I see Lois, did you have your hand going?
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Just a second. Oh, try again.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Okay, good. So like many people, I had not done any online teaching before the coronavirus situation. And I'm doing a lot of them now. And I've been just using Google Duo and just basically doing a face-to-face. I can see one picture of them. They can see one picture of me. And I'm thinking that I might use Zoom instead and add microphones so we can have different views of fingers or things like that. Were you going to get to that anyway?
Yes, I mean, I think there's going to be some questions that are pretty common to everyone. So one of the things that's really useful in Zoom in particular, I mean, there's all these different types of software. So there's going to be ones that I've dealt with and ones that I haven't. But with Zoom, it's very easy to change your camera. So let me try this. And I guess if you sort of hover on your screen, and you'll see down the bottom, usually there's the microphone and also the video. And if next to those, you have little arrows, and you can select your video source. Now, if you just have a iPad or you're on a laptop, it probably has one option right now. But if you plugged in, so I'm going to change mine. I'm going to look a little different now. Yep. And but if you have an external, you asked about microphones, but then you also asked sort of a video question. So this is a little webcam. They come in all shapes and sizes. And what I actually use is this little camera clamp. And so for guitar, I can just put that on there, and then I don't know what view this is going to get, but it's going to get a different view. So this could be pedaling for piano on the feet, or it could be hands, like a top-down view. So if I go to it now, you'll see there's my whiteboard. And so that could be, the hands of the piano. For me, usually the right hand of the guitar, because that's what's often hardest to see. So yes, you can have multiple inputs. You can have multiple cameras, webcam setup, which works very well. And then yes, in regards to your question about microphones, that does make a big difference. Same thing. You can select between, right at the moment I've got this, which is a external microphone, and then as maybe some of you have seen on the video, you can sort of switch between. You'll hear quite a different. This is now should be the sound coming out of my iMac, which is probably more boomy and echoey. Quality, and so they make a huge difference to be able to switch between those. And then if you are, what instrument are you, Lois, or what's your
Piano?
Piano. Well, piano is probably good, like guitar, in that you are stationary. But if there are any sort of woodwind teachers, violins, these are pricey, but they're very worthwhile. There's lavalier mics. These ones you can, and you have a receiver and a transmitter. So the receiver can plug into your audio input, and you can move way back and demonstrate full body shots if need be, or if you're double bass. So you can have distance, and yet the microphone's still going to be on your lapel.
Okay.
So that's a really, my wife's a dancer and she uses those for her dance because she has to move around so much. So that's a problem for those who do need to move around, because the sound gets quite bad if you start walking away from the microphone.
Well, my son-in-law was the one that suggested the microphone, and I'm thinking, I'm teaching piano. Why do I need that? It seems like having, at least, especially for little kids, I mean, under third grade, let's say, I've discovered, suddenly that they really don't learn by listening to instructions very well. They're not really doing much ear learning. Mostly it's tactile learning and visual learning, and you can't do that. And so it seems like the more viewpoints you could give them with different cameras, the easier it would be for them to see what you're doing.
Yes,
some of us are very, very elementary and rustic. So
well, I also think
go beyond it.
Yeah, young people, their attention spans are different, and so I think changing camera angles might actually be positive in that regard and keeping their attention potentially. But does that, and the microphone really is, just as you would have with your iPhone or what have you, a very small camera in it compared to a big DSLR, which has a big lens. Just similarly, you have small, pretty insubstantial microphones inside the computer compared to a microphone that's really much more suited to what you're doing. So that's why you might have an external microphone. The sound quality just is going to get better, no question.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any sort of files lined up to show you right now, but I run these live sessions every Sunday with my students, and we got some of them with external microphones and the settings within Zoom, this original sound, and taking off all the auto settings, which counter for echo and background noise, and it made a huge difference. You really can actually start to hear nuance, and you can hear dynamics instead of sort of this gated on-off kind of sound, which is really one of the big desires of all of us, is to actually hear a sound that sounds like what we are used to hopefully hearing. So I'm gonna pop over to Jean now, and because
I think I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Yes. You know what? So thank you, Lois, very much. Jean, I think it was my fault, so I apologize.
No, it was not. I just couldn't find my unmute place.
Okay. Well,
I want to follow up. Your previous speaker asked almost all the same beginning questions I want to. So I teach beginners to intermediates, and some of them are young children. And I just to follow up on something you mentioned, and for the piano teachers, the camera angle thing, would you please just go over again the product information for what would enhance that?
Do you mean the actual webcams, or how to switch between them?
How to switch between.
Oh, okay.
Can I do that with just the basic what I have now?
Yes. So on your screen, unfortunately, when I share my screen, I can't actually share what Zoom looks like because it.
That's okay.
But you see down the bottom left, you've got a little microphone icon and a little camera icon as well.
Yes. Just a minute.
It looks like you're on a phone too. It might be a slightly different layout, but you can select between different outputs. It might be a little different on iPads and iPhones, come to think of it. Are you on a phone?
I'm on an iPhone. Is this something I should be doing on my laptop?
Well, there's definitely a couple of restrictions on the iOS devices or the interface on mobile. One of them is they don't have the sound options that we do on PC right now or desktop. So yes, I would suggest doing it on a desktop.
Okay, just so can you address it for that, and we'll work, and I will figure it out later because I'm not signed on my
Sure.
laptop.
Sure. Okay. So down the bottom left of the screen, and you have a microphone icon and a little video icon, and next to that you have two little arrows, and those arrows allow you to select different input devices and output devices. An input device means either audio going in or video going in. So you can select between what signal you're choosing to go from. And the output device is where that signal is going. So for instance, normally for most of us, we're using the internal speakers of our computer. It's kind of the default setting. But if you had big stereo speakers you wanted to use, you can also choose to sort of route the sound there, or maybe you had an external monitor, a big monitor. Some people have these amazing setups where they've got monitors and speakers and all that kind of stuff. So you can actually choose the inputs and then the outputs if you start getting external devices. And what I mean by external is not built into the computer, anything that's separate. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but what if I wanted to get a basic external device?
Mm-hmm.
What would I be looking for?
Okay, so these I can't pick it up. I was going to make everyone seasick, but this one is a little Logitech webcam. They're often called webcams, and they a little small thing. I actually on the website I put a list of resources.
Okay.
But so Logitech webcam. If you Googled that, it would come up.
Sure.
They sit on top of your screen, and they're just very good. So that allows you to move it around, and then the other thing that you will want to do if you're not using it on top of your monitor is there's all sorts of little tripods and things. This one, Evita, my wife, actually got this as a Christmas present by mistake, and it's turned out to be fantastic. So this is it's meant for an iPhone, right? It's got it's supposed to be a little portable iPhone thing that then attaches to your desk with this clamp, and I just use it to angle that little webcam. You can use. We also use camera tripods. Like it seems like overkill because they're quite large, and there's got this tiny little webcam on top, but it works. So a camera tripod with the little threaded screw attachment at the bottom, that works. Or little clamps, or maybe duct tape. I mean,
Oh God.
well, whatever works. And duct tape.
And excuse me, what the thing you just showed us? What is that called?
I don't even know. It's a little.
An iPhone something?
It's a phone. What would you call it? It's not really it's obviously not a tripod. It's sort of a holder, some kind of
Clamp. A clamp on.
Yeah. I think you can probably find things.
I'll find it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm starting from scratch. I am starting from scratch.
Yes, I think a lot of us are in the same boat. Well, thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Jane, yeah.
Yes, please. Sorry, because I've got to bob out shortly.
No problem.
I'm very, very new to this in that I haven't actually started the online teaching yet. Two quick questions. Is Zoom the platform of choice? Is that the best one, or can you get equal results with Skype and FaceTime? And the other question is there any advantage either to me or to the pupil in using earphones?
That's a great question. So Zoom, in terms of one-to-one, I think, and seeing the image, FaceTime, Zoom, Skype, they're all more or less on par. FaceTime has the least amount of variation in terms of functionality. You can still choose inputs and outputs, so you can use microphones and things, but you can't, for instance, as far as I know, screen share on FaceTime. So that would be good for showing a score or image or what have you. And it's also not fluid in changing viewpoints with a camera. Skype, you can share a screen. You can also message at the same time and so therefore you can put a link or a file. You can send files. So that's a step up in terms of that functionality. And then Zoom is really, it's more about the functionality of it. You've got to think about is it easy for the student to use? Can they just sort of pop on and don't have to worry about too much technical stuff? That's one question. And I think they've all proven to be pretty easy to use. But Zoom's, you'll start, once you get into it, you'll start thinking, oh, I want to show you what I'm seeing on my screen, or I want to send you a file, or I want to send you a link, or I want to play you audio. And that's why I think Zoom has been so popular, is it is easy to use. And it also just has all this functionality which we would want as music teachers, because we want to have all this extra stuff besides just verbal back and forth.
Sure.
And the last point on Zoom is, you can control the audio much more.
Right.
So there are these settings. Maybe we'll do it all together a little bit later, but going into the audio settings, you can turn off something called echo cancellation. That's where your headphones are going to come in.
Right.
Also, they try and lower background noise. So if there's any dogs barking or humming sounds from a fridge or something, it tries to automatically curtail that. And in doing so, it ruins musical tone.
Right.
So you can actually turn all of those things off, which I don't know that you can do that in other programs. And when you do turn all of that off, the sound becomes much clearer. So all of that is to say, I think Zoom would be worth your time trying to learn the things. Now, headphones are very good because you do tend to every now and then get some echoes. Sometimes the signal gets a little out of sync, and so you start hearing yourself or they start hearing you, and headphones can be incredibly useful. Depending on your instrument, they're also practical. If you've got a violin and you're trying to have a headphone cable go underneath the violin that's going to be a pain. Some people manage to get the earpods, those Bluetooth ones that can work without cables. But it really does help with sound because you don't get any echo, and you can take all of those settings off, and it'll be a good idea. So if you can use headphones, I would recommend.
And if I were to use headphones, would the student need them as well, or doesn't it,
No, I
does
mean,
it only work if you both use them?
no, one person can use them, and it will probably help a little bit with some problems. If you find you're hearing echo on the other end, if you're hearing your own voice on the call and say, them putting in headphones will fix that.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks ever so much, Simon. I'm going to have to disappear, but many
No
thanks
worries.
for that. It's
Good
really
luck.
helpful, even a little bit.
All
Okay.
right. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
There is a couple of chat questions in. So Ken asked what audio interface I was using. Often you can go straight into your own computer, and that's usually where you're looking for USB microphones. This microphone, this is called, as probably many of you know, is an XLR input, a standard microphone input. And so if you have one of those, you have to go through something else. So this is called an audio interface. I have this one because a long time ago I thought it was a great idea to try and record my own albums. I learned very quickly that's harder than it seems. So I have that from back then. But you can have much simpler ones like the Apogee, like they just have 2 ins and 1 out, and it's basically a device that turns the microphone sound into a digital sound that goes into your computer. So there's a USB from here that goes into the computer, and it comes up as an option to use. Now, this is a pretty high-end little thing that you can change the volume of different channels, and you can you do all sorts of things. You can have phantom power and stereo into mono and things like that. But honestly, for the most of us, we just need a USB microphone. The Blue Yeti or this Audio Technica AT2020 with a USB, they all work just fine.
Simon, just to follow up on that question, do you have any issues with feedback then if you're using external sound sources and a microphone?
Yes, I haven't had that because I don't use external speakers, but yes, you can. Basically, you start adding more complexity to the chain, you're going to have more troubleshooting, and the big enemy of us, all of us, unfortunately, is something called latency, and it's the speed at which the signal gets to all the different destinations. And if it's slightly out of sync, that's where you start getting feedback, that's where you start getting echo, and that's unfortunately why at the moment we can't play with our students or one another. So low latency will improve over the years for sure, but right now it's not an option. Averil asked, could you talk about screen sharing? None of the tutorials seem to work for me. I'm especially interested in how to access files, and then what do you see on the screen when you're sharing? Okay, so screen sharing is a really useful tool because obviously it can show the score, but we can also show videos. We can show other YouTube videos. And also you can share very high quality audio, as in it will sound exactly the same to the listener as it does to you kind of audio with screen sharing. It's a funny, I don't know why we can't get that kind of audio out of a microphone, but we can out of the screen sharing, but that's what it is. So if you want to play a video or an MP3, it actually comes out, the sound is excellent. So, screen sharing can be simply show the other person exactly what's on my screen. So right now I've got a Word document open and I've got Zoom open and there's some file thing and they'll see everything. That's screen sharing your desktop. You probably don't want that. When you screen share, usually you have an option to screen share a particular window. So for instance, when I click on screen share now, it'll come up with choices here in Zoom. I can show the desktop, which is exactly like I said, it's everything in the kitchen sink. I can show my Skype is open. I can show that window. I can show my Finder on my desktop. I can show, which is quite useful, if you have an iPad plugged in. I know I'm talking very Apple centric. I apologize for that, but that's just what I use. If you have an iPad or an iPhone plugged in, you can actually show that screen, which would be very useful if you have an iPad with the scores open, if like Fourscore or one of those music programs. So you can show with your annotations, you can show that. But the most common usage is just a program. So I'm going to open up Pages here. This is just some of the questions that came in through email in case we didn't get any questions today. And so that shows that particular program, which is a very useful one. So this would be useful if you wanted to show a PDF. So you open the PDF program that's on your computer. So Averil, I know that's an overview, but do you have a specific, well, first of all, I guess, what operating system are you on? And do you have a specific question? Has something been troubling about that? Averil says, when I do click on screen share, only my whiteboard populates the screen. Okay, so, whoops. As a little aside, because I'm just clicking through the options here, for all of those who are teaching, especially kids and teenagers, you probably heard about the Zoom bombing. So this is actually where you want to take care in that, maybe I can actually, here, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to try and, I really want you to see my Zoom. So I'm going to see if I can show my desktop. No. See, I was hoping it would show. Nope. No joy in that one. It's trying to be too smart. It takes away what I'm seeing with Zoom. So anyway, next to the options, next to share screen, you go to advanced sharing options, and that's where you want to check who can share their screen, and you want only host, if you are the person hosting that, to be the one that shares the screen, because that's where people will come in and share all sorts of stuff according to the news reports. I've never had any problems with it because I work with adults, but I can imagine it's a minefield with kids. So Averil, I think if you're only showing the whiteboard, I don't know, you might want to delve into the options there for screen sharing. Sorry, it's going to be a little hard unless I can see people's desktops. So I have some more text questions coming in. Tom asked, I'd be interested about some kind of overview of the system, if possible. I mean, what does the path to online course teaching look like? So do you mean, Tom, moving forward from one-to-one real-time interaction to recording videos and then having people use those? I assume that's what it is. Out of interest, does anyone watching, yes, that is what Tom meant. Is anyone else interested in that? I'm curious to know. Ken is, and Randy, okay. So online teaching in that format starts to get very interesting in terms of leverage. Oops, there's people waiting. And what I mean by that is when we do one-to-one teaching, it's basically an exchange of time for money, as in like, here's half an hour of my time and could you please, this is my fee. And when you start recording your materials, your teaching, you can then put it into a course format where and obviously it takes a bit of organization and choreography in terms of the materials, because it's not in person teaching. But then you take those questions that you get again and again and again, like show me the hand position for piano, or how do you do harmonics on guitar? So that question that you get asked many times can then be recorded into a concise and crystallized video, and you can place these into courses. And this can be a really good option for music teachers in terms of an evergreen income stream, where someone could be learning from you at 4 a.m. while you're asleep. So that's what I mean by leverage. You take your time and effort and you put it into a video course format, and then people can access it and you get remunerated for your efforts. And so it's not actually a big leap. It just takes a little bit of thought into, it's actually great as a music teacher to get your words in order. Like you get very good at communicating concepts because you don't have any questions coming back. You just have to get them done. But if you already have been working with a curriculum, it's just a matter of recording them. And most people, I think, would worry, I have to get fancy footage and fancy, production. But really, you could do it with a webcam. And if you're an experienced music teacher with many years of experience, you have a lot to offer. So it's not a big leap. Tom, maybe Tom, well, you can also talk as well. People have gone to the chat questions, so you can unmute if you want to talk a bit more about it. But yeah, I started 10 years ago doing this, and now I run 3 membership sites, and the largest one is the classical guitar one, and we have several thousand people from around the world that learns through a full curriculum. So Tom asks, so do you just start offering the course instead of the one-to-one lesson? Well, the thing about online teaching in general is you can actually start getting quite creative. So you can imagine that with a one-to-one lesson, not everything sinks in right there and then. So you can actually augment your one-to-one lessons with other materials, which I think is a really great way to use pre-recorded videos. Or think about this, especially with connection issues and sound and what have you, if you have pre-recorded materials that they see before they come to the one-on-one lesson, that could be a great way of communicating as well. And then you could dive straight into productive time where you have a question and answer instead of taking up 10 minutes of, can you hear me? Or the sound is there or not. And so that could be very useful as well. And so one way, Tom, to transition into that is to kind of mix between pre-recorded and one-to-one and really be mindful of how that works in the flow. What questions do come up? And then you start incorporating those questions in the pre-recorded video. And over time, you get material that's actually very good for self-directed learning. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an overview. And then, the furthest extension of that is these membership sites. Some of you, it sounded like a lady before was from the UK. I'm from Australia. I grew up with this music system called the AMEB, the Australian Music Education Board. And in the UK, they have Guildhall and Trinity and the Royal College. Same in Canada, they have the Royal College. And this is a graded approach to learning music, a little bit akin to Suzuki. And so that's actually translated very well to online education because we just had exams just now, actually, so we've got 130 exams to get through, but it's partitioned, you know, it's sort of goal-oriented learning, and we have repertoire assigned and practice routines and harmony and theory and things like that. So that's sort of the final iteration where you can really build a school online. Kathy has asked, on the audio line, at times I find the students' volume that I can hear is very low. They have the volume turned up, but I'm not hearing it as well. Any ideas what's causing that? Yes. So the world of sort of, we're all kind of entering the IT world, unfortunately, in that we're having to troubleshoot technical problems. So there are going to be all sorts of settings that can be changed from that. So there might be a setting in the software where you can actually, in certain programs, you can lower your volume or the sensitivity or what have you. In the audio settings, which I all encourage you to have a look into, especially in Zoom or whatever program you're looking into, you can actually say the sensitivity of the microphone, or you can talk about something called gain control, like how sensitive overall the microphone is to sound. And then there's going to be hardware. So you've got the software, and then you've got hardware things that you can troubleshoot. Like, some microphones have a volume knob on it. Sometimes there's a gain control, or something called a pad button, which actually suddenly makes sound drop in strength. So there's all those kind of things. So there's kind of a troubleshooting thing. I would start probably with software, then move on to hardware. And Kathy, with another audio question, says, so no way to play duets from two locations. And the answer, unfortunately, with that is no. With ensemble music, we can get creative. Actually, Maria, I don't know if she's, yeah, actually Maria, I do see her name here. But Maria asked about this question specifically in email, and within that email, she actually had a lot of really creative ideas around this, of which she said, I've had them sing lines, this is, Maria works with a choir. I've had them sing lines individually, unmuting then mics in turn, and unmuting is going to become a big part of any group. Like you can see now, you know, if I unmuted everyone, it'd be fine, but we'd hear a lot of background noises and things. So unmuting becomes a big part of this management. She's had them reviewing sight reading, have them clapping rhythmic patterns, had them dancing to up-tempo music, and rehearsing independently the songs they plan to do. She's posted lyrics and sheet music, karaoke recordings. So all of those are creative ways to get around this problem. You know, we can play duets. You know, if I started playing something now, you could hear me just fine. Like, you know, for those of you who haven't gone through the experience, I'll just do it anyway. But if I were to play, you know, you can hum and sing or play, no one's going to hear you, you're all muted, so it's fine. But you know, you could clap along with that, you could play along with that. It's going to sound totally fine to you, 100%. So it's actually quite effective. Obviously, the big problem is the teacher can't hear what just happened. So there are some creative workarounds to that. They start getting a little fiddly, but you know, the student could record themselves on their computer with QuickTime or something, and then with screen sharing, play it back straight away afterwards. Or you could record it on your phone and later on upload it to YouTube, or that starts to get a little heavy lifting in terms of really we have to send files to each other, but something like that. We have to get creative as teachers in that kind of model, because at the moment we can't hear each other and play together at the same time. You can kind of get two sound sources, but they're going to be out of time. They're going to be out of sync. Tom, I mean, I'd be curious if you want to unmute yourself and talk more about it. I'm open to that. It's hard to. And Greta asked, oh, is Zoom the best platform I found, or is there another one that I'm aware that doesn't have the sound gates? Short answer to that, Greta. Yeah, and we did talk about that just a little bit earlier. But yes, I do think it's probably the best. Okay, Tom, in regards to the going to the courses, I guess the part that I didn't mention is that you need somewhere to house the videos. So at the very simplest level, you could have a YouTube channel, have them as unlisted, have a blog, and just embed those YouTube videos in order. Let's say you've got 5 lessons to learn, 5 video lessons to learn a particular piece of music or a technique, and you just put those up and ask them to go through an order. From there, it can get very sophisticated. You can have things called an LMS, a learning management system, where you can have, people can't see the next lesson until they've completed it. You can have quizzes along with it. You can have downloads along with the videos. You can have multiple videos in different little windows that address different issues. So you can get really quite sophisticated with it as you build out these courses. And then there's an issue if you want to monetize these courses, then you're going to have to start using systems like this. PayPal, obviously many of us are familiar with. Stripe is a system similar to PayPal that can take credit card payments. But then it does start to get more complicated as you want to get people coming in sort of smoothly, like paying and then getting instant access. And Tom asked, are you still selling through word of mouth? This is an interesting question. I'll sort of broaden this out to just getting students in general, because you probably have students you work with already that were one-to-one or one-to-many in person, and now you're online. But if you're interested in trying to find other students, then there are many different ways to do this. But yes, word of mouth is going to be the most powerful. For almost everything in life, we need to know, like, and trust the people, to work with them and to transact with them. That goes for businesses as well. So it is quite a tall order to buy some kind of advertising on Facebook or whatnot and then expect that people will just suddenly turn up and knock on your email door, so to speak. So reaching out to networks of people that you already know, whether that be the students themselves and saying, look, would you mind putting this out to people because we already work together and you can speak with experience, or other teachers if they have a network. So starting with people you know and people you have a connection with. Potentially the next best step from that, which is cold calling, or sort of like reaching out to people you don't have any contact with, is to create content. And so that people basically see who you are, how you communicate, maybe how you play as a musician, and definitely how you interact as a teacher. A piece of advice that I would give to anyone doing things online, whether it be on a small scale or large, is don't get wrapped up in trying to be what you've seen other people do. It's a very instinctual thing to sort of think, oh, I have to make this polished. I have to, we've probably all seen YouTube videos where they're very kind of almost hyperactive, and they jot between, like they have graphics and all sorts of things. And sometimes it's easy to think, oh, I have to be like that, or I have to be, whatever I've seen on YouTube. It's really, just as in-person teaching is, it's very much your individual personality and your teaching style is what's attractive to students, and it will remain that way. So don't try too much to be what you think is needed to be an online teacher. I know maybe it sounds like strange advice, but people often get hooked into feeling either inadequate or ill prepared in terms of technology or production. But just be yourself. Don't try and talk differently. Don't try and talk like an advertisement. Authenticity shines through on the internet because there's so much junk out there. So you've got, your personal connections and people who you know, like, and trust. And then if you wanted to go into the world of people you don't know, then I would suggest creating some examples of teaching, whether that be a pre-recorded lesson with someone that you already had and you asked their permission to record them, or you're just teaching direct to camera. Take some simple things, simple concepts, teach about a technique aspect, a theory aspect, and you'll be surprised that people, out of 100 people, there's always one that resonates with you and your approach and the way you say things. So that would be a good way to start, I think. And then the other, I would say, if you want to really establish, like if you're taking this online moment and you want to keep running with it in the future, the other big thing would be to start an email list, so to stay in contact with people. That should be done immediately rather than later, because when you think about it, anything that goes out into the digital world, even if it's outstanding, there's no way to reconnect with those people unless you're directly in contact with people. So email lists and things are incredibly important because it allows you to stay in contact. Okay, so well, before we get to Maria, yeah, Richard said, absolutely. So Richard said, for people that are just starting to teach online, some might not realize that in order to follow what your student is playing, you must have the same music in front of you. I teach clarinet, and I need to see their face and hands and therefore cannot see their music. 100% agreed. And it's not just the same music, it's the same edition, you know, because you're going to have different markings, sometimes different bar numbers, all sorts of things. So it's hard enough to say system 3, measure 2, beat. That's hard enough to get them there, let alone with different scores. So being a little prepared by sending them ahead of time the PDF, or getting them to send the PDF ahead of time, is going to be really helpful. That reminds me of a question, so someone probably will watch on the replay, which is about copyright. That's an interesting conversation to have right now. And the stark answer for a lot of copyright questions is it's illegal. Like most questions, there's sort of, the only times you can actually use things legally is fair use and with permissions, or Creative Commons licenses, or public domain. Public domain, I'm classical guitarist, so I'm fortunate that I have a lot of public domain material that I can use, although we've started now working with composers directly to create, because, you know, obviously we wanted some diversity in the style of music. But fair use is very wishy-washy, and all of these laws start to get different between different countries. So that's why it's such a minefield. But look, it should be fair enough to share your screen with a system of the music and annotate it and things like that, and excerpts of music. Usually they say less than 10%, so let's say it's 60 seconds long. You could share 6 seconds theoretically, and be within fair use. So there's the legal side. The practical side is everyone sends PDFs to one another. Everyone's going to be playing YouTube things, and no one's going to come knocking down your door. The worst you would probably get is what cease and desist, or a DMCA letter saying, we've come to our attention, you've been propagating copyright material. And if you had on our website, they'll ask you to take it down. That's probably 99% of the time the worst thing that's going to happen to you. If you make money, a lot of money of something, it's a different story. People will come after you if you've been using copyright material. So there's the legal thing where I say a lot of stuff is going to be illegal. I personally go on the ultra safe side of things because I just don't want to lose sleep at night. So I'm all public domain. I make my own editions. I work with composers. My wife's a Lindy Hop dancer, which is music from the 30s and 40s, so that's still in copyright. So we work with jazz bands here in New York City. We get their permission for mechanical licenses, and but we can't use, jazz standards because that's the composition license. So we have to use original music from band leaders here in New York City. So we stay on the super safe side, but it's also, we run a business out of it. So it's very important on a couple levels. So the legal side, the practical side, and then the final one is just how you choose to manage it. What's your level of comfort? What's your level of comfort in regards to risk and respecting creators and copyright and all of this. So it's really everyone's drawing their own lines, to be frank, about where they decide to go in that copyright world. I know the AMEB in Australia a little while back, I don't know how they technically do this, but they lifted their copyright on all their editions, saying teachers at the moment are welcome to send through different editions for personal use, not for public dissemination, obviously. So there might be similar situations going on with different publishers at the moment, given acknowledging what's actually going on. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you'll probably experience this too in online teaching. You end up talking a lot. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, they're very welcome. But I am getting more texts coming in. Yeah, well, just because this was on the same topics. So Greta said, I thought that when using music for educational purposes, the usual US copyright laws are waived. There's a lot of misconceptions with copyright, and that's why I said most of the time it's illegal. Like, my wife is a great example of that, in that, you know, she wanted to use some music on a video, and it's like, oh, but we're not making money off the video. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like, basically, if you want to use something someone else created, justifiably, they should be compensated because they contributed to what you're doing. And if your music teaching is benefiting from some other's creation and you're just saying, oh, but it's education, it's sort of the same thing. So there's the fair use, Greta, is probably what you're talking about. I don't think it doesn't encompass a blanket green light for using materials. But then, of course, there's the practical matter of what we actually end up doing. So Maria asked for some online ideas for beginning band students. So this might go for anybody that's working with ensembles, right? One thing that's quite cool in Zoom is if you have a hosting account, you have something called breakout rooms. So we have a Zoom room right now. There's 22 people in here, and I could create a breakout room, and you could either do it automatically or manually, but you could split everyone to 11 and 11, or 10 and 12, whatever. You can actually change it up. Or you could split it up into math 11 rooms and have pairs of people. Now, I think this would be very useful in a classroom situation where you could send off people into pairs and they could trade off with duets, again with muting, or trade off with exercises, or give them a challenge to figure out. You know, in the case of guitar, I know we often have fingering choices to make. So you could give them a passage and say, okay, go off in pairs or a group of 4, come up with a fingering, decide on that, and come back and we'll talk about it. So breakout rooms, I think, offer a really good opportunity for teaching, because this giant glob of students thing, if we try and unmute them, it just doesn't work. It's hard to do the back and forth. So the breakout rooms, I think, could be a lot of options there. Likewise, you could do one at a time type things, but Maria, I know you sent through that list, so you probably have thought through a lot of this. I think you also mentioned, Maria, the backing track thing. I think is quite interesting, where people can play audio from their end and play along with it, and then everyone can hear exactly what they're doing. So that could be an interesting workaround. One of the best workarounds that I did mention in a video I made a while back is having students create videos ahead of time. If there's a seminar kind of setup where they're playing and then they get feedback, having pre-recorded videos is incredibly effective. So you can upload them to YouTube, as unlisted, so it doesn't get to the public, and then you just need a link, and then you can screen share with great audio. Everyone can hear the audio. Then you can have discussions about it. You can have back and forth about it, and potentially you could even use that as the duet that everyone plays along with. This sort of little creative workarounds. One of the things that I remember back in I started 10 years ago with online teaching, and I used to get a lot more pushback than I do now about the validity of it. And my argument was always, we're not trying to take what we do in person and translate that to online. That's not what we're trying to do. We actually look at the toolkit we have, which is quite diverse, and come up with creative ways to use that. We're not trying to say, okay, we've got a band that meets on Thursday, a marching band, and we're going to try and do that on Zoom. It's not what it's about. It's really about coming up with creative ways to use the tools that we do have. Okay, some more questions. And please, I'm getting super eager to hear someone's voice. So if anyone wants to chime in, they're very welcome to. So Michael says, I'm an elementary general music teacher, K to 4. We are now out of school in Pennsylvania for the remainder of the year. As the online learning is also brand new to me, are there any beginning general lesson ideas that you might recommend that could be taught to young learners at the same time online? I know you're speaking mostly to private individual group instruction. If I'm out of line, I really do appreciate all you recommend. Yeah, totally not out of line. I think a lot of people here are working with groups, and my caveat here is I'm not very experienced with kids. My experience with kids taught me that it's a totally different ballgame. It's a whole nother skill set, and their attention spans, and so I would think, again, thinking creatively, the Kodály method with visuals might be an interesting way, because we can all see each other quite well, and that could be a functional way to do visual things, not necessarily being in time, but either visual representations, games with imitating sounds, visual games, what do you call them? Flashcards. K to 4, you might be in sort of that world of describing things or coloring, using colors, or simple sort of question and answer type things like what instrument can you identify here, or it just really has to get creative. I do like to think also that besides playing together, anything that we can do without physically touching someone, we can usually figure out online. That's the line I gave my wife, because she's a partner dancer. And so it's a real challenging transition, but I made her start to think about the workshops she would do. That's where you're up the front and you're talking to a whole room of people, like 30 or 40 dancers. Maybe you go around and sort of adjust some positions or whatever, but you don't actually physically touch them on a regular basis. So you could probably translate a lot of that. So trying to think, what do I normally do that doesn't involve physical contact and doesn't need ensemble playing?
Simon, it's Avril.
Hey.
Sorry,
Yeah,
my
please.
voice is rather croaky, but I teach a lot of theory courses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for best methods? I'm thinking PowerPoint, etc., but anything else that could be done to help students move through that theoretical knowledge well?
Yeah, an interesting one with that could be using, there's a lot of, I use Sibelius. Maybe people know Sibelius and Finale as notation engraving software. But there are programs out there that are quite good. One's called MuseScore. It's free, and it's the same functionality as Sibelius. And so with screen sharing and MIDI playback, pressing spacebar and then hearing the harmony, you could probably do some interesting things by assigning, if it's a 4-part harmony, getting either sending them a Sibelius file, a MuseScore file with something that is incomplete, and they have to complete it, and then they can play it back. That could be a sort of workaround from the standard, writing it in on the pre-written stuff. I was just thinking about singing back intervals and things like that. Definitely sight singing on a sort of modus novus, kind of like getting people to sing back sight singing, like Maria was saying actually.
Can you talk a little bit about MIDI? Because again, that's not something I'm really well versed in.
Okay, well, MIDI is, it's an acronym, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And so if you screen share and also share your what's called system audio, that means they hear anything that you hear through your computer, then you should be able to share when someone presses spacebar and they play back on those annotation programs, it's the MIDI sound. It sounds digital, but it's fine. It still works. Then the student can play it back to you, and you can play it back to them, and vice versa. And if you had the same examples on your screen, you could sort of, in real time, take what they did and show, oh, here you've got parallel fifths, and here, or it actually could be quite, I think it could work quite well. More so, it's more in your favor as a theory teacher than an instrumental in some ways. Is there anything you've tried, Averil?
Not yet. I've just started making the transition. And so I'm just building materials and tools, hoping to start in a couple of weeks once I have enough background information put together to actually run. But I do everything I do through the RCM, so everything from beginning right through to grade 10. So it's a lot of material, and I know the RCM is now starting to put out materials, but it's strictly through their system, and I do others. I use a lot of different inputs as well. So it's really just putting all that together right now.
Yeah, I can imagine there's quite a bit of work in terms of preparing materials. I mean, for people who ask questions like Tom, like moving forward, this is actually a great way to prep materials if you wanted to have it as a standalone course, because you're going to be creating a lot of preparatory materials that they could actually function quite nicely as then a standalone course. You can also screen share with just a normal PDF and then annotate that PDF. So you potentially it would look a bit digital, but you could write in notes potentially, or at the very least phrasing or identifying things, identifying intervals or rhythms. So you could, again, work with examples that are incomplete and then complete them on the screen, or be sharing things. Or you could get them they could actually verbally communicate to you, in beat 2, you want to add a C above that E, and then a G above that, and they could tell you where to put the notes, and you could input them.
Yeah.
That could work potentially.
That's kind of what some of my PowerPoints involve right now, is question and answers and things that they can add to. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and you could absolutely screen share your PowerPoints as well. So anything that's PDF/PowerPoint oriented, I think would translate very well.
Yeah, just have to get my screen share to work.
Right. Oh yes, you asked about the screen share. Yes, we'll persevere with that, because it definitely is in there. It's hard for me to troubleshoot, but good luck with it.
Thank you.
So probably, I appreciate your time, and I don't want to take too much of it. Does anyone have any? I know there's a couple more questions. Vera?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're on. I can hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I was a teacher in Boston, and I was very experienced with very little ones up to seniors, and had duos, trios, and quartets at home. So I had that experience 10 years ago. I came back to Brazil, and here's very complicated for teachers. Very. So I had not much experience teaching here. I did teach, but not really professionally worked. So last year, before coronavirus, I had already decided I was going to teach online to US students, since I had my experience there. And I had already contacted with a few schools and everything. They're very interested, but I'm kind of insecure still, because I would like to practice. My question there was, like, can I practice without having students come to Zoom and figure out that I am ready to do this? I was insecure because I had like a very small place, so now I have a better place, but I'm still not sure if this is going to sound right. I would like to have that. It's very easy with people in front of me, but like this, I'm still insecure, and I've been already trying to do this, putting around on Facebook and everything. And so one thing is that part, and the other thing is the advertising part also. So the two things I'm kind of stuck, feeling stuck, like insecure about. Perhaps also because it's been 10 years since I was a teacher full time, and like really, like I was living of it, in Boston, and here, not quite. So I think I'm there. I had access to all the books, and I had no instruments. It was easy for the students to get instruments. It was easy for the students, more or less easy to get them the instruments ready, like for prepared, like the string instruments. And in Brazil, we don't have everything is complicated, and so I got really kind of lost. And so I'm trying to get back, to the US, kind of like be there while I'm here. Now with coronavirus, I need to do this. I have to be, because I would maybe moving to Canada or the US again, but now, no, I'm here and I need to do this. So that's a little bit my story. So basically, I'd like to get really prepared and feel that I'll be myself, the one that I used to be. And
I almost feel like asking Evita to come in here, because she could definitely speak to the journey of feeling incredibly insecure about it. It's daunting. I recently have been doing a lot of live streaming, and so has Evita, and we both sort of said, this is really hard. Like, we got very nervous and like found ourselves sweating afterwards. And it's very much like performing, in that, we have to teach the amygdala not to be afraid of this process. And but the point is, it gets easier the more you do it. Advertising too, anything where you put yourself out online is daunting. And, I definitely, you receive some negative energy coming your way, no question, because and you have to develop a little bit of a thick skin. I don't have a thick skin at all, but you just have to start dealing with that kind of, it's just unfortunately part of the online experience. I'm not saying that you'll experience that, but it's somewhat to be expected. So there's a little bit of mental strengthening in that. The realization is, not everyone's going to like what I do, and that's okay. And just sort of really embracing that and saying, but the people who do enjoy this and do benefit from it, that's who I'm doing it for, and that's what you need to focus on. And it really is, I work with a really amazing community right now, and it's a really positive impact on their lives. But I focus on adult amateur musicians, because I've thought over the years that, amateur musicians have often relegated to the audience, and they sort of need to clap for the person on the stage. And I don't see a particular difference between the gradient of a passionate learner to someone who's been passionately learning for a long time, and their skill levels are different. I see it very much at the same path. And in some respects, the amateur musician actually has a purer approach, because they don't have ulterior motives. They don't have to mix it in with career development and ego and identity and all these other things. So the point of that is, you just need to think about why you're doing it, who you're good for, and who resonates with you, and focusing on that. And with that kind of focus, and really not indulging yourself in all of the fears that come in, especially highlighted by online, like, oh, they're going to make fun of me, or I feel I'm not as good as so-and-so, or what gives me the right to whatever, it's just a mental process that we all go through. I definitely went through it. Evita went through it recently, over the last years, and you're not alone at all. But think of it in a view of, there's definitely people out there would benefit from your instruction, and you have to connect with them. And to do so, you're going to have to be strong to get through that sort of jungle of online stuff that might be in your way, whether that's technical barriers or fear or all sorts of things. So there's an element of perseverance that'll just have to be there.
The practice, did you, when you started, a long time ago, but did you practice doing this, or just started, were student and online and
right?
Yeah, right
Well,
away. Like,
look, I think maybe a couple of practical ways for you to start. One, on a very simple level, would be simply if you have a phone and a computer, you could create a free Zoom account and have your normal Zoom account and just call the phone and just practice working with the technology, just saying, here's the mute, here's the share screen. And I don't even know if you need to actually call someone. I think you can actually just open it up, create a meeting, an empty meeting, and just play around with a lot of the settings. That will be of great use. On the next level up, if you have a student, you could say, hey, I need to practice working with Zoom. Would you want to do a trade? Basically, I'll teach you a lesson, we'll work on it, but you have to be patient with me as I work this stuff out. And so you just have a trade lesson where they give their time and you figure out some tech stuff, and maybe it takes 2 hours where it normally would be 1 or whatever. And that you just learn into it. And another way in terms of advertising I've seen people do is to go onto internet forums or on their Facebook things and say, look, I'm offering free lessons. So again, it's a way to quick start your connection with people and find out if it's something they would enjoy. And so often people will say yes to free things. And so, it could be a way to meet people. And then there's no pressure either way, but if they enjoyed it, then they can continue on. And here's my rate. A couple of little inventive ways to get the ball rolling.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's good.
And no worries.
I tried that in Brazil, but here it didn't work. But I know that in the US it can work. So I just need to. The thing is, the advertising there, So that, but you're not in the US either. You are in Australia.
I'm Australian, but I'm in New York City.
I are in New York City. Okay. Yeah.
Well, another thing to think about is it's very hard to get our minds around how big the internet is, but it's big. And so it's not a Brazil-US thing. It's really the things that will delineate your audience's language, most likely.
Is what?
Language.
Uh-huh.
So, you might find students in Portugal and you might find students in...
But I speak English. No, but I think in English most of the time. So.
Okay, well then, first of all, there's expats everywhere, so there's English speakers everywhere. You'll find people in Sweden that speak better English than I do. So there's English is a very versatile language for online education. You're going to find everywhere. So.
I mean U.S. because I know the country. I lived there for almost 20 years, so I understand how it works. I understand the students liked me, so it was a really good relationship. So other countries would be like some other things to learn. Like even Brazil, like I don't know as much as I know US in terms of teaching, in terms of. But that's really good. What she said that's helpful. I meant advertising on Craigslist as I used to do in Boston. But now it's paid for each town, so it's different. I wanted to do just like a whole thing, like the whole country, but now like each town is paid, and Brazil money is really low. So it's.
Look, what I would recommend is if you were in the US for 20 years and you were working with students, then you have a lot of people you've established relationships with. So I would, people don't do this very much anymore, but you could call them on the phone and say, look, this is what I'm doing. This is my project. Could you help me out? Basically, I'm going to post something on my Facebook, and could you send it around to people on your Facebook, or could you email it to people that might be, and you ask them, and the same thing with the trial of the lesson. You say, look, I need to learn how to use this. Would you mind? It'd be great to hear you're playing again, and you could help me out, figure out this software.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks. Yeah.
Honestly, almost all of this boils down to relationships in the long run. So if you think, and it's a nice way to think about it because it's far less intimidating.
What is it?
It's far less intimidating because it's just relationships. I mean.
Yeah. Thanks. That's really good. Very much.
Well, thank you, Vera. All right, I think this is. I think most people. There might be a couple more questions in there, but does anyone have any more questions or anything? We might wrap it up otherwise. We're down to the final crowd that made it all the way to the end. Randy, I'm curious. What's you sort of remember you put your hand up for you're interested in courses and things. what are you interested in particular? You may, yeah.
I was just curious. I teach public school, grades 6 through 12 band and choir, and I teach private piano at home. So I'm curious how to deal with my band and choir classes that are ensemble performance based, and now we have to come up with stuff to do. I'm gonna think probably it's gonna be more one-on-one or small group, just to hear them play and sing, and then me give feedback.
Well, I mean, you know what? So, yeah, there's been a couple of guitar projects. I was talking with my former teacher who was doing this festival in July, and we're trying to rejig it. One of the things that could be possible, it's a lot of work, but I think with choir, it might actually be a little easier because with bowed strings and voice, it's a little more forgiving for entries. But, I'm sure you've seen those videos with the grids of people singing, right? And so I've sort of, I guess the school semester finishes June-ish, depending on snow days and stuff. But, a longer term project would be working, individually. And then with the goal, it's just nice to have a project to work towards. And then having that goal of, okay, everyone needs to work on this piece or passage or what have you, with the metronome timing exact, so that we'll layer it. Like that'll be the final. It'd be just a nice way to maybe wrap things up.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And you can do it in iMovie, or some pretty accessible programs that might be available at school or what have you. It's not too hard. It's just, I guess it's more about choosing the right repertoire, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's on the simplest side and got a very clear pulse or rhythm, that might be a nice thing to sort of have as a goal, and that would be the backbone of why we're working still. Like there's something to work towards. Maybe
that's a great idea.
You could also, I use, there's something I didn't really mention before, but I use freelancers from all over the world. There's a program called Upwork, or there's Fiverr, which is more for small tasks. But if you don't have a skill set, like if you don't have the skill set to line all those videos up all the time, you can often find people that do, and you can get them done. I have a guy that does engraving for me in Guatemala. He's amazing. And I've had a woman in Ireland do it and stuff like that. So you can find people that can do this. And that might be a way around it too. If there's a couple of, technical or time barriers, you just send them a big old thing of video files, albeit maybe working with kids is a different matter. I don't know, like in terms of privacy things, but, something like that might be feasible to find someone else to help. Or you could just source people on your Facebook. It's like, I really want to have my kids have a project. Is there anyone out there that's willing to give their time and skill sets for this? Maybe.
Thank you.
All right. No worries. All right. Well, you've all received emails from me, so you know how to get in touch with me. But thanks for your time. It's good to meet some of you and understand where you're at. And I wish you all the best. So take care, everyone. And I'll see you guys online maybe. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.